the newly app runtime deployments working group. So today I wanted to use the first meeting as an introduction round for all the approvers or all the ones who are on the call now. And then I would give the word to Dave, who can hopefully give us a first introduction to the CF deployment release process so that we have a good overview. And based on that, then I should hopefully soon start to create a roadmap for the handover. So our working groups charter is here in case anyone has not yet seen it. Here you go. We have so far I've done a few organizational things like managing the GitHub organizations and teams. This should all be in place now. We have a list of repositories belonging to our working group. So mainly CF deployment and then the test, acceptance test, smoke test repos. And I've also started with the very first draft of dashboard, Kanban style dashboard, but this will have to evolve over time. So maybe we first start with a very brief introduction round because maybe you know each other, but I guess not everyone. I think from Fidelity, did anyone join?
Yep, we've got myself and Andy from Fidelity.
Ah, yeah, okay, you too. Okay, then please introduce yourself, just a few sentences.
Sure, so I'm Jim Connor. I've been working with Cloud Foundry for the last 10 years now. I did a couple of years at Sky TV, a couple of years for the UK Government Digital Services team, and the last 6 years at Fidelity, all of them open source Cloud Foundry.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Andy Driver. I've been working for Fidelity for a while, originally using Cloud Foundry using the Pivotal offering, and then we migrated from Pivotal Cloud Foundry over to open source. And been working it for a number of years. I work with Jim.
Okay, thanks. Then we have, who's next? Maybe Carson?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Carson. I've been working with VMware for about 2 years. More recently focused in the CF deployment area and logging and metrics.
Okay, thanks. Then Stefan would be next.
Yep. I'm Stefan Merker. I'm actually not listed in the list of approvers for CF deployments. However, I represent SAP in the technical oversight committee of Cloud Foundry, and was involved in creating this working group. And I have a background of 5-6 years of Cloud Foundry with landscapes at SAP, basically.
Okay. Then Johannes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Johannes Haas. I'm with SAP and Cloud Foundry, with SAP for a couple of years already, and with Cloud Foundry now for about 3 years. And yeah, I've done numerous CF deployment updates within our Cloud Foundry deployment. So yeah, looking forward to contributing to it.
Good. Okay, we had Andrew and Jim, then Philip.
Yeah, hi, I'm Philip Thun. I'm in Stefan's and Johannes' team. I'm also working with Cloud Foundry for several years, knowing the transition from CF release to CF deployment. That's
okay.
it.
Thanks. Then Dave would be next on my screen.
Sure. Dave Walter. I've been with Pivotal now VMware since 2015, working on Cloud Foundry, both component teams and predominantly releases both on the Pivotal side with ERT, PAS, TAS, And then the last 2.5 years now, open source with CF deployment and CF for K8s, CF on K8s.
Okay, thanks. Next would be Piotr. How do I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, you pronounce that correctly. It's my name is Piotr Komborski. I work for Fidelity International. I'm together in a team with Jim and Andy and Sean. We have a big Cloud Foundry installation here. I'm familiar with Cloud Foundry for the last like 10 years, I would say. Yeah, I'm a platform engineer, basically.
Okay, thanks. Then we have Chris.
Hey everyone, Chris Clark. I'm the program manager at the Linux Foundation on Cloud Foundry. I've been working at the Cloud Foundry Foundation for almost 6 years now, so going back quite a ways. And yeah, so I'm here recording the meeting, and I help out with various administrative things for the community. And yeah, feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions or anything.
Okay. Then Aftab.
Yeah, hi, good evening. So yeah, my name is Aftab Alam. I'm working with SAP. So it's almost now a year working in this area. So I have done couple of few CF deployments, but not more than that. So I'm fresh, or with zero experience, I would say, but fresh. So yeah, looking forward to working with the team and colleagues. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, last one would be me. I basically share the same history as, or share history with Stefan at SAP. We started working with Cloud Foundry 6 years ago, almost 7. And yeah, I also had the pleasure to collect much experience using CF deployment to integrate this into our many landscapes and get it up and running. Okay, good. Then I would.
Can I just say, because the mouse pointer is pointing at him, Sean Pan is also Fidelity, but he's located in China, so it's about 4 a.m. for him. So he's unlikely to be on any of the calls for the working group.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Well, extra body we can use for reviewing things and getting work done, but yeah, he just won't be on meetings at this hour. So that's
okay,
fine.
good. Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate, but yeah, okay, we can't likely find a slot which fits for everyone. But okay, maybe I can set up a separate meeting with him just to get acquainted. Good. Okay, but then now I would hand over to Dave and take notes. So then please, Dave.
Sure. Okay, sounds good. So today I just wanted to give you an introduction to the processes we have for managing Cloud Foundry, predominantly the release bump processes, the CI testing processes, and then finally the release processes that we have in place, just so that you can start to get a feel for how this works today and how we can take this forward. So let me share a screen, which would be that one, I hope. Hopefully you can see Concourse okay.
Yes.
Bring you back into view here. There we go. Okay. So there are two main sets of changes that flow into Cloud Foundry. The most frequent one are component release bumps. And so we have, over the last couple of years, we developed a pipeline that will automate the testing of those releases in isolation, and then the incorporation of those changes into the CF deployment develop branch. So in each of these jobs, each of these represents a single BOSH release in Cloud Foundry. So for example, this is BPM is the top of the list. I guess Concourse sorts it by the overall length of the job name, so it starts with the shortest. So we have this lock job is just acquiring a a BOSH environment, a bubble environment to do testing on. And then this job kicks off. It will, we validate against release candidate because that's considered stable. So the idea is if anything fails, it's failing because of the new release bump. So it runs some tasks to bump the version on the against release candidate locally, bubbles up the environment, and then goes ahead and deploys and runs smoke tests. If everything works, then it will export. This is where the compiled release comes from. So it exports the compiled release here, and then it makes those same updates against the develop branch and actually pushes that to develop, uploading the compiled release to the GCS bucket. If it fails, and I can go to one that failed here, I think, no, that failed far too early. Let's see if this one failed in a better way. Nope, still early. Well, never mind. I will just talk through what happens if it fails because you can see the grayed up tasks. If it fails, it pushes the changes to a branch, retrieves the BOSH logs, and stores those in GCS, and tries to notify the component team via Slack to say, hey, this thing failed for a reason. The logs are here, you can debug it and figure out what's going on. And then it always tears down the environment because we don't want to leave it lying around. Otherwise, we'd very quickly run out of pooled environments. So that goes through, there are like 3 different categories that we split this up into, otherwise it gets a bit unwieldy. These are what we call the base releases that are compiled. They're actually referenced in the CF deployment YAML itself. There are the build packs, and then there are releases that are mentioned in ops files. And the difference here is these are not compiled. But other than that, it's all exactly the same testing. So once that flows through, that hits develop, and that will then hit the main pipeline that I'll get to in a second. The other thing that we have, obviously, are our PRs, which have, we already have a couple open at the moment. They have a much smaller set of tests run against them. The only checks that we have here are that the base branch should be developed, and then we have a set of fairly simple unit tests. And really, these are just checking for consistency within the YAML itself. They're checking that if it's an ops file, it's mentioned in the README, and that it actually has test coverage to make sure that it interpolates against the base manifest. So it's a fairly low bar for validating PRs. If we had concerns about a particular PR, we would spin up a bubble environment manually and deploy it to make sure that it worked that way before we merged it. So those are pretty much, that's all the changes that come in. Those are the 2 main avenues. We moved very early on in my time on release integration to a model where nothing was committed directly to develop. Everything was validated in some way, shape, or form first. All of the changes that we made as a team went through the PR process, so that way we felt the pain that contributors felt, and I think that helped us to improve that flow. Once it hits CF deployment develop, it then goes through the main testing pipeline, which is this. Again, it will run all the unit tests and make sure that everything is kind of sane before it starts. And then it will go through a series of test scenarios that we have. They're long-lived bubble environments. There's no deployment there normally. They get cleaned up at the end, but if anything fails in the middle, then they'll stick around. But we have a scenario for, and I can isolate these things. So we have a fresh install that is just doing a clean install. It also includes isolation segments. So it's got isolated Diego cell and isolated routing. We have an upgrade from the latest release that I believe just has isolated Diego cells. We have an experimental pipeline. This is where teams could request that an experimental ops file be validated by us in preparation for being promoted either to being merged into the deployment manifest itself, or being promoted to a production grade ops file, a stable ops file, as you might say. Bosch Lite testing, Bosch backup and restore testing, and then Windows testing with the cats for Windows. So all of those things run in parallel. Like I say, they each claim a lock, a specific lock for their environment, because there are nuances to the way that the bubble is set up for them. They will all do their appropriate deployment, and then run their appropriate tests. So BBR is running Drats. Bosch Lite, we gave up on running cats a long time ago. It was just too unstable. Upgrades, Windows, Fresh, experimental, there are running cats and smoke tests. And then once all of those pass, it funnels back into this blessed manifest job. And that is where the change then gets merged from develop into release candidate. And then that will trigger the job that kind of starts to build out the release notes template. So this is where we get the table of all the release changes that go into the release notes. And the other thing that then triggers is the deletion of all these environments. After that, we then, at some sort of cadence, normally we're aiming weekly, but that's been a little tough more recently. We can then trigger one of the three jobs to actually cut a release. To go through that, we have a wiki page that details all of the steps involved. So basically, we would start by looking at the release notes, gathering all of that information, look at the list of, okay, well, what's changed based on the previous release, and start to decide, okay, well, is this a breaking change? Should this be a major release, or can this be a minor release? Generally speaking, we've been fairly, I would say, fairly conservative about what constitutes a breaking change. And the challenge here is operators can have a lot of their own ops files. And so we want to be very careful. Like, to us, if the operator has to get involved because the structure of the YAML that their ops file is modifying has changed to the point where it won't interpolate anymore, that's a breaking change. And that has been, it can be fairly restrictive. I mean, obviously things like changing the name of a job or an instance group, moving jobs, but also deleting things, even changing variables. If a property for a job gets removed and the operator had an ops file that was modifying it, that could also be considered a breaking change. So really, the catch-all is anything that requires out-of-band intervention on the part of the operator becomes problematic. Obviously, removing ops files that they may be using. We do have a mechanism for promoting ops files where we basically drop a symbolic link in experimental that points to the stable version, which avoids a breaking change. And then the next time we have a breaking change, we just clean all those up again. So if anything matches those criteria, we'd say, okay, this is a major release. So we'd run the ship it major job. If not, ship it minor. I don't think we've ever used patch. I mean, it has been run, but if I can actually click this thing. Yeah, December 2017 was the last time that was run. So we certainly have never cut a patch release in my memory. But yeah, then we run one of those two jobs. GitHub's made it a little easier these days. It's got the automatic release note generate button that I'll use to generate the PR section of it. Paste in the, let me see, I can go find the last release. I go here, yeah. So this stuff we massage based on what GitHub gave us. Paste in the template. If there's anything particular that we want to call out, we can put notes about a particular release bump. And then this is more GitHub stuff that it gives us, which is nice. And yeah, that is the release process. Is there anything else that is worth mentioning here? Any questions so far?
So you make heavy use of Bootstrap BOSH to set up test environments. Where is this? I mean, if there are several of these jobs running in parallel, you are really deploying a lot of different Bootstrap BOSH Cloud Foundry foundations, right?
Yes, I mean, if I go into, we have, right now it's set up with, and I think this was due to, didn't need to go into there, but that's okay, I can go into that. I think this was set up because of the problems we had initially with GCP getting sufficient quota, but we have, if I drop this down, we have separate projects for each environment. So if I go into Trelawney, that's the upgrade environment, and I just go into VMs. I think this is deployed at the moment because CI is, yeah. So you'll see that that's one Cloud Foundry deployment there. If I go into, I think Baba Yaga is BBR. So BBR is here. Yeah. So each one you'll see is completely separate. Some of them I think we scale down to 1 AZ, so there's only 1 VM per instance group. But some of them, especially if we're running cats, then they kind of need that capacity to run cats reasonably well.
Okay. Do you only use GCP? Or?
No, so the experimental environment is running on AWS. But those are the only 2 IaaS that we test. The assumption being that BOSH and the underlying infrastructure will take care of the nuances of the different operating systems or the different cloud providers there that we've got. That means that, yeah, we don't need to worry too much about that.
Okay.
Curious, how deep do the Harry Potter references go? I can see Trelawney, Luna, Hermione, and Snitch there. Are there lots of other Harry Potter themed things to look out for?
I think it's just the environments. Again, this predates me. The dev environment that I can spin up if necessary, like if I go to infrastructure, we've got Luna, Trelawney, Hermione, Snitch. Bellatrix, for some reason, was our stable environment. And then the development environment was Maxine. So yes, it's just the environments, but yes, they go throughout. But then there are the odd outlier, which is like the BBR environment is, if I can find this, it is for some reason Baba Yaga.
Yeah, I don't understand that reference. I'll have to look that up.
That's a Star Wars reference.
All right.
So they switched genres at some point. I don't know. I don't quite get that one, but yes, that all predates me.
Cool.
And so this pipeline, just while I'm here, this is the pipeline that manages those long-lived bubble environments. So we have a job that tries to run every Tuesday morning. It's red because it couldn't acquire the lock for it. But this just runs bubble up to make sure that it's up to date every week. And if we have really serious problems with it, we can completely destroy and recreate it. So there's one of these for each of the environments in CI, and also one for cats.
What is cats tool?
Cats is the environment that we use to test cats. So any change that comes into cats, similarly, we'll go through a testing process before landing on unreleased candidate, and that has its own environment that is long-lived. It is kept up to date every time we cut a new release of CF deployment. And then every time a catch change comes in, it just, let's see, where does it trigger? If that is the case, I'm just looking for, it triggers right here. So that will just run the cats unit tests and then actually try and run cats against a CF deployment and also CF cates.
Okay.
And then, yeah, that will get merged to release candidate. And then again, we have the release process jobs for that.
I mean, what kind of Concourse resource is that cats pool? I mean, most are GitHub resources, we know, yeah, but
this is so that the pools are all managed by Concourse. There's a Concourse pool resource and there's a Concourse pool trigger resource. So the pool resource actually takes care of, you can claim and unclaim lock files, and those are basically just represented by files inside these directories. The contents of those files, the name is obviously the name of the lock. The contents can be metadata related to the environment. We generally don't use them that way because we found that keeping that metadata up to date was not feasible. So we have a separate repository for those. But then there is also the Concourse pool trigger resource. And this thing is basically just responsible for watching the pool repository and triggering based on events that happen in it. So for example, I don't think we use that too much here, but actually we may not use that here. That may be used in other pipelines I'm thinking of. So I think it's just the pool resource that manages it. It's triggered by the changes to develop. But the trigger resource is nice because you can have pipelines that actually manage a pool and say, okay, if you want a dynamic pool, then it can spin up environments and add files, and then that can trigger other jobs. So we do use that elsewhere.
okay. Yeah, quite complex.
So,
but
there are, and let me find these in here. So if I go into the CI directory of CF deployment and I go into the pipelines, we've tried for the major pipelines to have a markdown file next to the YAML for each pipeline. So this has a lot of information, the information I've been presenting today that walks through exactly the same process, probably in a bit more detail that I've forgotten. But that will go through all of that. It talks about the release management, pipeline management. So there's one of these for CF deployment, infrastructure, update releases has information that talks about what it does. And then, like I say, the wiki has the release notes for the release process, and also talks about our acceptance process as it was when we had a full team focused on this. So this is something that we can look at and see. Oh, looks like I never finished filling that out. That's okay. So there's release processes for, I think, the cats one will be in the cats wiki, I'm sure. But then, yes, it talks about the environments and just the GitHub repositories in general. The team was responsible for. One thing I didn't touch on, and I think this will be something we'll want to start looking at sooner rather than later. The other thing we had in the update releases pipeline was an automatic stem cell bumping job. This has not run since Xenial stopped. So I think one of the first orders of business is going to need to be to get this up to date with Bionic and get this pumping out releases based on those changes. this had two flows. One, if it was a minor stem cell bump, and one if it was a major stem cell bump. The difference there being that major stem cell bumps, to my understanding, involve kernel changes. And so all of the compiled releases have to be recreated. And so the way we handled that, we have a job at the beginning that detects what type of stem cell bump is it. And so it looks at, is this a major or is this, if I go back, I'm sure this will say that, yeah, this is a minor. So you can see if the minor number changes, then the assumption was the kernel number is not changing. And so we don't need to recompile everything. So what that allowed us to do was the minor stem cell bump would literally just, it would, again, test everything by deploying. If all of that passed, it would make the change directly on main, trying to short circuit everything because we know, okay, it's a minor stem cell bump, it deploys, it runs smoke tests, everything's fine. We would go straight ahead and this would cut a release at that point. And it would then also make the change on develop so that it could flow through the main pipeline and everything would be in sync. If it was a major stem cell bump, then, and I'll go back to a green run here, then this is where it would now say, okay, I've got to deploy everything and then export all the new compiled releases, upload all of those to GCS. And because this was such a big change, this change went on to develop and would go through the main pipeline to then be validated and released in a more controlled way. This wasn't something that we felt we could just push straight out to main and have it appear without full validation at that point.
Okay. Sure, good.
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of information, I know.
Well, quite a lot, sure. Quite, let's say, sophisticated pipelines, however.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to get to the point where we were eliminating a lot of the busy work of just managing release bumps. When I first joined the team, we had a pipeline that would automatically make the change on develop, but there was no validation. And that was causing us a lot of pain because the main pipeline would go red because teams would push changes in new versions of the release. And we had no differentiation between consuming a major, a minor, or a patch. And so when a major came through and we had needed to make manifest changes and things, it really slowed us down. So all of this work was in service of keeping the main pipeline flowing, isolating any changes like that needed attention to something that either we could look at or the team could look at, or certainly help us with. They could make a PR from that branch if it failed, and then we'd get the bump and the corresponding manifest changes that were required. And then similarly, the stem cell work, we again used to just have, I think, a job that would make the change on develop and then let it flow through. And this was then all optimizations around it, reducing the amount of work that we need to do, but also getting the changes out and released as quickly as possible.
Okay. Now, one of our next big stories is to release the Jammy stem cell or integrate this into CF deployment. How far have you already pushed this?
That is a good question.
I think I saw already a pull request for getting Jammy into the, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I believe we have support for Jammy if the operator wants to bring it themselves, then everything's in place in CF deployment to allow that to work. But right now, that would be a custom ops file to do that. Because I think if I go to CF deployment, all of the add-ons and things mention it, but obviously it just means changing this section at the bottom.
Yeah, this is still on Xenial, and I think there is an open issue asking to change this to Bionic.
But we should probably update that now to Jeremy.
Yeah, now we can jump over Bionic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So any other questions from anyone else?
Maybe one question from my side. When we, or let's say like this, in the recent times, the release cadence of CF deployment went down a little bit. We have now this CF18 again. My question is, what needs to be done in order to get back to a, let's say, more bi-weekly delivery or something like that? And maybe the next release, could we do it somehow together just to learn? Actually, that's maybe one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started working with Carson and Tom, who's not here today, on the VMware side, bringing them up to speed, and that's part of what's caused the slowdown. Was I was taking time, like coordinating with them, rather than me just saying, "Oh, okay, it's Friday morning, I can cut a release." I wanted to work with them and make sure they were in the loop and understood the process. So yeah, I'd love to go through that process with people here. We have to figure out a good time to do that. And then I think it's mainly just a question of deciding what cadence we want, what criteria we want for when things are ready to cut a release, and coordinating who's going to do it at that point. You know, I'm trying very much, you know, for I guess the previous 6 months, it's just been me, and so I've been just saying, okay, well, I can look at this and make time whenever I feel like it. It could be Wednesday at 6 o'clock in the evening. It could be Friday at 9 a.m. Doesn't matter. But now I've got to coordinate with all of you, and yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, ideally we would have a new CF deployment every sprint. That would be every 2 weeks for us. That would be the perfect case. But yeah, not sure if we can achieve this. Yeah, okay, so well, the immediate next steps for us would be to set up our own Concourse server, similar to the Bosch CI server, where their pipelines are running. And yeah, I already talked to Ruben and Chris about the account and stuff. So yeah, this is not so much the problem. Yeah, and when we have that, and we could start moving the pipelines. Yeah. Okay.
From my part on that, I can start thinking about what it will take to move the pipelines, what we're going to need in terms of resources, how we can hopefully consolidate a lot of what the sprawl that we had on release integration with all of these different TCP projects, and try and bring that down into a more manageable set that we can use as a working group.
Yep, that sounds great.
Regarding the stem cell, would it make sense to anyway still get the Bionic stem cell process running, just to have everything in a nice working shape before switching over to Jemmy, or running Jemmy in addition? I don't know. I heard Ruben asking for that. Couldn't we get that back to work? I mean,
certainly from Fidelity's point of view, having just dealt with the PolKit vulnerability, that's a fairly recent one, and having to rejig all our stem cells, having some fresh stem cells arriving would be really, really good round about now. And anything we can do to help get stem cells moving again, we'll be all over that.
I mean, from our point of view, we are also deploying our landscapes with a Bionic stem cell, and the stem cell themselves, they are flowing. It's just that they are not, let's say, integrated into CF deployment. And let's say, one could say there's a little bit lesser trust in CF deployment because it looks like it, it never gets tested with that one. I think there are some jobs that are actually using the bionic stem cell in the background somewhere. I think I've found some, but yeah, maybe we can put that. It should not be a big effort, actually, right? Everything is
yeah, I think
and
most things are in place. I don't know what the timeline is for Jammy, but it probably would be good to go through it with Bionic just to become more familiar with the process and the tooling that we have for managing this. And then next time through with Jammy, A, should be a lot easier, but B, maybe that's something that other people can work on, and it doesn't have to be me working on that at that point. So it helps to spread the knowledge, which I think would be really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. So if there are no more questions, then I think we have already learned a lot today. Meetings are scheduled only once a month. I really can't tell if this is enough for the beginning or not, but let's leave it at that. If you need more meetings, no problem. So yeah, I will try to compile a roadmap with all our tasks and to-dos. I already started to get familiar with Git projects and this fancy Kanban board and the fancy upload script that Ruben provided. Yeah, we don't have too much time left. I can show this then next time. Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll drop links to everything I presented here in the Slack channel as a starting point so that people have that.
Yes,
and
that
then
would
we
be
can
good.
gather that together into working group documentation.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah. Good. Then thanks a lot, Dave. We'll surely contact you more often.
Definitely happy to help.
Good.
Okay.
Any
great.
other urgent questions, comments, suggestions? Yeah, well, okay. If there are no more urgent topics, then I think we can close this meeting. And yeah, see you later.
See you soon.
So, bye.
Very much.
Bye.
See you later. Weeks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for attending.
Okay.
Bye-bye.